Hi, it's John Wolf from the Ford Consumer Experience Movement, and I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about creating connections, specifically linking up with our customers. What you have here is a chart that identifies what it takes to boost organizational effectiveness in almost any kind of organization. The three circles across the top are really nothing more than a real basic profit chain, and you read it from right to left. So the target of almost any organization is success, whether they measure it in profit or growth or volume or change in units year over year. There's any number of different ways it can be measured, but profit and growth, success is what we're striving for. Organizations are successful when they have engaged customers, and the more successful an organization is, the greater the likelihood they have a goodly number of engaged customers. I would identify engaged customers who do business with you on purpose. They view your organization as a destination. They want to do business with you. They don't necessarily live in the neighborhood or work nearby. It's not necessarily just habitual behavior. They've dealt with you before and they're coming back again. They're coming back because they want to deal with you. In very many instances, I'll go into a new dealership and I'll talk to the service manager and I'll say, "Tell me about your customers." And he'll say, "Oh, you see that gentleman over there? That's Mr. Smith. He lives 75 miles away and he drives in here twice a year for an oil change. He comes all the way, passes half a dozen different organizations, different dealerships where he could have gotten the oil change, as well as a whole lot of independent shops, but he comes to us 75 miles each way twice a year because he likes us." It's because the customer is engaged. And every organization has them. As a matter of fact, some research indicates that on average, you're looking at somewhere between 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 customers who are really and truly engaged. Now, you only have engaged customers when you have customers who are dealing with engaged employees. In other words, if I'm a customer and the person that I'm dealing with at your dealership is somebody who gives me the impression that they don't really care about being there or they don't really want to be there, why would I ever want to come back and do business with you again? And look at it from the employee's point of view. Let's say I work for you. And before I ever get out of bed this morning, when my alarm went off, I flipped my legs over the edge of the bed and I'm sitting there with my head in my hands going, "Oh, crap. I got to go in there again today?" How good am I going to be when I finally get there? Chances are that I'm not going to be very good at all. The point is that if my employees are not engaged, my customers aren't likely to be engaged, and I'm not likely to have the sort of success that I would like to have. Now, this idea of engaged employees, both the dealership and the employee bear some responsibility for that, and I'll come back to that as we get toward the ends of this chart. Now, when we talk about engaged customers, another way to say that is I'm looking for customers who are committed. They're committed to the organization. They care about us. There's some customers that no matter what you do, they're never going to be committed. The research from Gallup says that customers fall into 3 categories, and that this is kind of the bottom category, this not committed customer. About 16%, again, 1 out of 6, maybe 1 out of 5, that's really and truly not going to ever get connected to the dealership no matter what it is you do. But in large measure, what you're talking about is creating a relationship with that customer where he or she wants to deal with you. I'll give you an example. My wife does virtually all of the grocery shopping in our family and has, well, pretty much since we've been married. Now, we've lived in the same house for almost 30 years, and when my wife does grocery shopping, she drives right by a big supermarket within, I don't know, half a mile of the house. The store has been there almost since we moved in. It's part of a small local chain. It's well thought of. They hire kids. They do all kinds of really nice things, and it's a full-size supermarket. About 18 months ago, they renovated the place, and as supermarkets go, boy, it's nice. My wife drives right by it every time she shops, goes about 3 miles. It's only, this is the one I'm talking about, it's only about a half a mile from our house. She drives maybe 3 miles to a store that's a little further away. Also a supermarket, but not quite as big and certainly not as newly renovated. And so I asked her, I said, "Well, why don't you shop at the store around the corner?" And she said, "I don't like them." And I said, "Okay, how come?" "Well, they never have enough people working there, and the ones that are working there, they act like they're doing you a big favor. You know, if you want something you don't normally buy and you find somebody who does work there and ask them where it is, they're likely to, just sigh and point. They're going to go, 'Oh, aisle 6. And look at you like, 'Don't ask me anything else, I'm busy.'" I said, "Okay, I got that. So how is that different from the store you go to?" And she smiles and says, "Oh, at my store? Oh, they're so friendly. There's always plenty of people working. No matter what they're doing, they stop and talk to you. There's somebody stocking one of the shelves. You walk down that aisle, they stop and they say, 'Hey, good to see you again. What are you looking for today?' etc." And if you're looking for something out of the ordinary, they stop whatever they're doing, they walk you right to it. And they say things on the way like, so what are you making tonight that you need this? Or what time should we all be there for dinner? That kind of stuff. She said, even at checkout, even if I only have one bag, they're saying things like, do you need help getting this stuff to the car, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm getting at here is that my wife is connected. She's engaged. She's committed to that grocery store. She does all her grocery shopping there. She doesn't clip coupons and shop at one store to save 25 cents on Rice Krispies and then go to another store to save 75 cents on Pepsi Cola. She does all her shopping at her store. So does she spend more money? Don't know. Does she spend less? Don't know. Does she care? Not even a little. It is her store. She's connected. She's committed. She's engaged. Now, I would tell you that if we're going to have committed customers, it really is the result of two different things, the transaction and the interaction. Now, when I use transaction in this context, what I really mean is the process that you take me through when I get here as a customer. For example, if I come in today to buy a car, it could be my first purchase. It could be that I bought 30 of them in my lifetime. I still am not entirely sure what's going to take place. I mean, I know that there is some sort of process that you're going to take me through. There's a lot of paperwork, there's contracts, there's other stuff that needs to be done. But as a customer, I don't know what it is. And truthfully, I don't care. Because you see, I figure you know, and you're going to walk me through it without a hitch. And when you do, you don't get a pat on the back from me. All you've done is meet my expectations. I've expected you to do this perfectly, and when you do it, nothing happens. You've just met my expectation. The challenge is, if you don't do the transaction perfectly, now you got problems. For example, I come in today and I buy a car, and it's a great car as far as I'm concerned, maybe the best one I've ever owned. I had a great experience. I loved my salesperson. I had a good experience in the business office. My car cost me less than I expected it to. My monthly payment is superb as far as I'm concerned. Everything about the car is great. I loved all the people, etc. I drive out of here today and I am above cloud 9, and everything remains that way for the next 2 or 3 days as I drive my new car. And that fourth day, you call me and you say, hey John, how's the car? I'm going, oh man, it's great. I love this car. Best car I've ever had, best experience I've ever had buying, and boy, I just am raving about it on the phone. And you say, yeah, I knew you were going to like it. I could just tell when you left. This is a match made in heaven. But I got to tell you why I'm calling. I did a little research and I discovered that, well, we made a mistake on the contract. We transposed a couple of numbers in the VIN, and so the contract is invalid, and you're going to have to come back down here and sign a new contract. Immediately, my attitude changes. Certainly, I've got thoughts going through my mind that are not entirely positive. At the very least, I'm thinking, well, I didn't make the mistake. I don't know where the VIN is. You know, most of your customers couldn't find a VIN if you gave them a map. I'm not even sure what it is, much less where it is. And you're telling me that somehow it's wrong, and so the contract's invalid, and now I have to come down, I have to be inconvenienced, come back to the dealership and sign this new contract. That's the least I'm thinking. More than likely, I'm thinking, uh-oh, they're going to try to get back into my pocket. They're going to try to change the interest rate or change the amount of money that I'm paying overall for the car, or who knows, all kinds of other things. In other words, if you're not perfect in the transaction, you're likely to be hurting yourself. Now, the transaction is not where you build the relationship with the customer. That's in the interaction area. You know, when we talk to salespeople and say things like, okay, you want to go out and look at the customer's trade. You want to find out a little bit about them. You want to look at the bumper stickers. You want to look in the back seat. You want to comment on things like sports equipment or perhaps kids' seats or any other things that you notice about their vehicle or any of the cues that they give you when they start talking to you about themselves. Get them talking about themselves. Get to know them a little bit and connect with them in more of a human fashion. Because that's where you really earn your money. That's where you get the information you need to go ahead and connect with a customer and help him or her land on the right vehicle. You know, with the internet, customers are able to do a lot of shopping before they ever come through the door. And if they're any good at it, they've got a pretty good idea how much the car is going to cost them no matter where they buy it. They've figured out how much the car is worth, and that's about all they're going to pay. Your challenge as a salesperson is to help them understand the value of paying your dealership an extra $5 or $10 or $15 a month for you and for the dealership and the benefits of being a customer at that store. The challenge is without some sort of personal interaction, that never happens. Now notice I said personal interaction. I said that because the interaction has two pieces as well. There is the personable and there's the personal. And I would tell you that personable is not enough. We've all gotten bad service when we've dealt with people who are personable. Personable people say things like please and thank you and have a nice day, and they might even smile. And they come across as, oh, it's very cordial. But in very many instances, they're of no value in terms of building the relationship. My experience with Comcast Cable in the area where I live fits this perfectly. I've been a Comcast customer 3 or 4 times, and I feel like I'm almost a hostage because I don't have a lot of other options. And when I've had problems in the past, I've called their helpline, and invariably I'll get somebody on the phone, man or woman, who is always cordial, who is always friendly, who is exceedingly personable. They say please, they say thank you, they call you by name, they're as nice as they can be, and they can almost never help me. They're completely useless as far as I'm concerned as a customer. So the fact that they are personable doesn't do me any good. What you're really looking to do as you build an interaction with a customer, as you build a relationship, is you've got to be a little bit more personal. And I'm not talking about creepy personal. I'm talking about the kind of personal that you would be when you meet somebody new. Let's say you go to a holiday party with your spouse, and you meet his or her coworkers, and you meet their spouses, and you talk to them, and you find out a little bit about them, and you find out how long they've worked in an organization, and how long they've been married, and whether or not they have kids, and maybe where they're from. So it's personal information, but it's not creepy stuff. I'll give you an example of how this makes a difference. I spend a lot of nights in hotels, and as a result, I spend a lot of nights eating by myself in restaurants. And I will tell you that 90%, probably more than that, 95% of the time when I go in to get a bite to eat in a restaurant, I'm at a table by myself. The waitress, and it's almost always a waitress, very seldom a waiter, the waitress walks up and she says, "Hi, my name is Sally. I'll be your server tonight. What can I get you to drink?" That's what they all say. And I would submit to you that all Sally has done there is, well, she's done her job, and that's about it. But she hasn't connected with me in any sort of a human way. She's simply going through the motions. Now, contrast that to an experience I had at a restaurant about a year ago. I'd had a really long day. I'd left home about 3:30, 3:45 in the morning. I'd driven 150 miles. I worked all day. I checked into a hotel about 6:30. And about 7:15, I'm going across the street to a little restaurant, a little private restaurant. And I get seated at a table, and I'm tired. I've had a long, tough day. And as I sit there at my table, the waitress walks up, and she smiles at me, and she says, "Hi, my name is Susie. How's your day going?" And I said, "Susie, I got to tell you, it's been a long, ugly day, and I am tired." She smiles bigger and leans over, pats me on the shoulder, and says, "Well, you have come to the right spot. We are going to take care of that." Well, I'm here to tell you I'm already in a better frame of mind. I'm already more prepared to have a better experience than I was expecting to have when I came into the restaurant. The long shot of that, or the long uptick of that, is that I go back to that restaurant every time I'm in that particular community. I've always been treated well there, and I always go in remembering this first experience and how well they made me feel, how good I felt sitting at that table, and how happy I was I'd chosen to do business with them. And it was all because of the way that the waitress greeted me at the table. It was personal and personable, and it was very human. What I really get at a lot as I talk about this relationship with our customers is in car dealers, what we're striving to do is make them feel SUV, special, understood, and valued. SUV. And the waitress in this particular example absolutely did that. See, what it's about is managing what you might call moments of truth. This is not my turn of phrase. I wish it was. It actually came from a book called Moments of Truth, written by a guy named Jan Carlson a little more than 30 years ago. Carlson had been the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines for 4 or 5 years, and when he took over at Scandinavian, the airline was losing $8 million a year. And the only way they kept their doors open is that Scandinavian Airlines was owned jointly by 4 Scandinavian governments, and, well, the governments propped them up. At the end of the first year in charge, however, Carlson turned a $2 million profit. In other words, in 1 year, they went from losing $8 million to earning $2 million, a swing of $10 million. As long as he was in charge at Scandinavian, they were profitable, they were successful, and when he left a few years later, he wrote this book, Moments of Truth. And he said the only thing that we did differently is we managed those moments of truth between our employees and our customers. He said we did a little research and we found that we had 1.8, 1.9 million customers in an ordinary year. And we had at the time somewhere in the range of 325,000 employees. Our research indicated that the average customer came in contact with somewhere between 2 and 3 of our employees, and that the contact time, total contact time with those employees, was approximately 45 seconds. And based on what happened in that brief contact, the customer was deciding one of 3 things. Either the customer liked the person with whom they dealt, and as a result were more likely to like the airline and have a positive experience, or they disliked the person with whom they dealt and were more likely to dislike the airline and have a negative experience, or they were indifferent to the people with whom they came in contact, and as a result didn't have any particular feeling about the airline whatsoever. He pointed out that 2 of those 3 things were negative, and so the goal was to focus on creating experiences with the customers that the customers thoroughly enjoyed. And they did that by taking a look at what was going on with the people that worked for them. He made the point in the book that there wasn't a lot of difference internally between his airline and any of the others. He said, our planes were the same kinds of planes that everybody else was flying. We were flying in and out of the same airports. Our people had the same kinds of experience and training. Our pilots they had the same kind of experience, same kind of training as our competition's pilots. He said our flight attendants had the same kinds of skills and so forth. And he said our pay scale was a match with all of the other people in the airlines. And he said what really was happening was that our people were not particularly well engaged, and they weren't engaging with the customers. Now, I would tell you that while we have changed the way that we interact with people in quite a few ways over the last 30 years, in large measure thanks to all the growth of technology, there are still, especially in this business, big moments of truth. We have a lot of personal contact with our customers. It could be that I buy a car, for example. It could be a lengthy contact. I may spend 3 or 4 hours as a customer with you. On the other hand, that moment of truth may be as brief as I'm walking into a men's room and somebody else is walking out and I bump into them. We've all had that experience. And many people are reasonably cordial and pleasant and polite, and they say things like, "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. We have to put a stoplight, I guess, up here." On the other hand, some people act like it's their restroom, and how dare you try to use it. The point is that these moments of truth could be lengthy, could be brief. They could be planned, they could be unplanned. For example, I've got an appointment, or I just come into the store. As a customer, you didn't know I was coming. It was very much an impromptu contact. It doesn't even have to take place here. Many of the people that work in the dealership are wearing logoed clothing, shirts or hats or jackets with the store's logo on it. And let's say that, one of your salespeople has an especially long day at work, and on the way home, he or she stops at the grocery store to pick up a few items. Well, there are other people in the grocery store, and they notice the logoed shirt, especially if they happen to be customers of the dealership, and they're thinking, that's where I bought my car. And they notice if your salesperson is carrying 19 items into the 10 items or less line. They notice if one of your people goes behind a woman who's carrying a small child and has a very full cart, and in pushing it down the aisle had something fall out. They notice if one of your people goes behind, picks that item up and gives it back to the lady, puts it back in her cart, and maybe even offers to push her cart through the checkout line for her. They notice those things and they draw conclusions about them. These moments of truth matter. And it comes back again to whether or not the people that are working for us are engaged. Now, as I said at the very beginning, the organization, the dealership, has some responsibility in engaging employees. It has to do with keeping promises. As an employee, I come to work for you. If I'm in the sales department, you're telling me, okay, you've got inventory, you've got a bank of customers, you've got a good reputation in the community, you're doing some advertising, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got all kinds of support people behind me to handle many of the things that I may not be real good at, et cetera. And I expect all those things to happen. I expect you're going to provide training in things like product knowledge and in how we do business and how to run the CRM system and all of those various things. But the individual employee has some responsibility here as well, and this needs to be driven home. An individual employee in this business is a pay-for-performance gig. You're very much in business for yourself. So if I'm focused on managing the moments of truth and managing the contacts that I have with my customer, all kinds of things come into play. For example, I've got to take charge of my attitude. My customer doesn't need to know that my wife and I had an argument before I came to work. They don't need to know that I don't like my boss. They don't need to know that I got a speeding ticket on the way to work. There's a little bit of showbiz in what we do, and I've got to focus on creating what's important, creating an environment that's important to the customer from the customer's point of view. The other thing, too, is I need to recognize that I communicate in all kinds of ways. It's not just what I say. It's tone of voice. It's even what I'm doing physically or how I'm dressed. So I want to be careful to make sure that I'm creating the right image when I come in contact with a customer. I need to be professional. Now, everybody has their own definition of that, but part of it has to do with personal appearance. I don't want to go into a store where you're expecting me to make a $40,000 or $50,000 investment, $400 or $500 a month for the next 5 years, and find myself dealing with somebody who looks like he's about ready to go to the tiki bar. I think appearance counts. I show up for work every day in a suit. Doesn't matter whether it's hot or cold, I'm in a suit every day. Long sleeve shirt, necktie up to my neck every day. I have a name tag on every day, even though I'm dealing in some cases with dealerships and people who I've known for 8 or 10 or 12 years. Here's the upshot of that. Every once in a while, about twice a month, I get approached by a customer in a dealership who asks me for help, because often I'm the only guy in the whole place that really looks like he ought to be there. And by the way, I always help them. I always say something like, it's funny, you pick the one guy who doesn't work here. But the good news is I know the people that do. Follow me. And I take them over to somebody in the store and I introduce them by name and say, here's what this individual wants. And I turn to the customer and I say, Bill here or Jane will be certainly able to take care of your concerns. Thanks so much for stopping by. And before I get out of the store, the chances are pretty good that that customer is going to seek me out and thank me again because I was polite. That's all I was. See, so much of it is personal engagement and recognizing what we say matters, how we say it matters, how we look when we say it matters. Using the right words. A simple example here, the correct response when somebody says thank you is not, hey, no problem. The correct answer is some version of you're welcome. It stands out, it sticks out, and it comes across as professional. Your customers don't necessarily have to act professionally in the contact with you, but it's up to you to act professionally, to be engaged, and to connect with the customer in such a way that they're glad they did business with you and they want to come back and do it again. As I said, nothing more than a chart that helps you better understand what it takes to be organizationally excellent. Try it out. I think you'll find it's valuable.